Hey, welcome to Whatcha Doin with Brandon Horwin.
And Sophie Williams. And today's special guest
Yeah,
is.
hi, I am Joe DiPietro, and I would call myself a theater animal. I am a playwright and a musical book writer and a lyricist.
Excellent. Well, welcome to Whatcha Doin. We are so thrilled to have you today, and
Thank
thank
you.
you for joining us.
I'm happy to be here.
So just to start out, you've had a remarkable career in theater as a playwright, lyricist, and book writer, as you said. So
Hmm.
can you just take us through that your journey a little bit? Where did you get your start, and where did it take you to today?
Right. Well, I grew up in suburban New Jersey, and for whatever reason, I always loved theater. And my folks would always take us to see theater. And my first show that I ever remember seeing was the original Broadway production of 1776. And once the lights came up on the Continental Congress, I must have been 12 or so. I was just hooked. I don't know what it was, and I don't know what this is theater, but I will love it and I want to be a part of it. And I didn't know how or what way. And then I just sort of became a theater lover, and I went to see as much as I could as a kid, and for everything from New York theater to local theater, or whatever I could. And then I was also sort of what I call a natural writer. I would write short stories and poetry and kept a journal, and I just loved writing. And then when I discovered plays and playwriting, I started doing that. So that really just spurred me on. So I think I sort of started just by really loving it and loving the form and wanting to learn as much about it, which I still try to learn as much about it as I can every day because it's a vast, ever changing medium. I just started with the love of it, and then I just started writing, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I went to my local library, had a theater section, and I took out every play that I could get my hands on. And some I loved, and some I didn't understand. And but I kept reading, and I read, you know, everything I could, as well as seeing everything I could. I like to say I sort of educated myself in that sort of way, just from a love of it, which I think is always in any part of the art. If you love it and you pursue it and you really just are obsessed with learning as much as you can about it and you enjoy it, I mean, I think that's almost the key. And I was, and then I went to college, Rutgers College in New Jersey, and I'm a Jersey boy, and I studied English, and hey, Jersey, and I also studied playwriting and all sorts of things. I didn't really actually, I shouldn't say that, I didn't really study playwriting. I studied English, and I read the great novels and the great plays, but I was writing on the side for a long time. And then when I graduated school, I went into advertising, and I was sort of a copywriter. I wrote a lot of television promotions and things. And at this time, I started writing short plays at night. And I wrote for a long time, and no one cared. And I was trying to figure it out for myself. I was living in New York City. I was living in Hoboken, right outside New York, and working in New York. So I would, then I discovered off Broadway theater and off Broadway theater and all sorts of really great different types of way of doing theater. And I just went as a fan and just kept writing and trying to figure it out. And that's really how I started.
Excellent. So, and through that journey, you were able to kind of fine tune and find where your voice may fit into theater, and that was, playwriting and eventually lyrics. So, how does playwriting and lyrics come together for you, and what similarities do you find between the two, and what challenges do they present? Are they two different animals, or do they sort of intersect?
Uh, they're both. I think my answer to that question is yes. They're both different animals, yet oddly they also intersect. And how they came about for me was really my first foray into writing for the theater. Had written some short one act plays and sent them out, and if I remember correctly, a couple got little productions here or there, won little awards, which was very nice and encouraging. But I was at an age where I just wrote a lot, and I love to write, and I wanted to figure out how do I get a foothold? How do I get my work seen? How do I even, the big dream, how do I make a living from this? And how can I quit my advertising gig? And I started writing, I'm a big political junkie, and I started writing little political sort of sketches and plays. And they were started getting done in these little New York basement theaters, the West Bank Cafe, some of these theaters, this was in the 90s, some of these theaters aren't even there anymore, but the West Bank is. But and I started doing these things, and I met people. The good thing is when you start putting up like shows yourself, you sort of meet people, and you meet people I met actors, I met directors, I met people who are interested in what you're interested in. And especially if you're young, which I was then in my 20s, and I was, really, I was basically I was spending the money I was making in advertising on doing these sort of basement weekend shows where you invite your friends and they buy drinks, and that's how these theaters survive, which is not very glamorous, but it was really fun. And I was writing these political sketches, and then which I love doing. And then me and my friends were talking about dating, and we were all young and single, and I started writing a couple of dating sketches, and it turned into this sketch review, which I called Love Lemmings at the time. And it played, and it was funny. I also learned that my natural instinct was to write funny, just because you write something in audiences, like you always hear comic actors saying, I walked on stage and people laughed and I was funny. And I sort of wrote, and I just wrote what I wanted and people laughed. I'm like, oh, that's sort of my voice. You talked about finding your voice, and finding your voice is trial and error. You just sort of have to do it. So I started writing these sketches, and it turned into this little show called Love Lemmings, and it started playing these little theaters here and there across New York, and I was having a great time, and I was rewriting every night because they were just sketches. It was a great way to learn how to write, and I had a live audience of 100 drunk people every night seeing it, and it was really a great lab in how to write for an audience, how to write comedy, how to write theater, how to collaborate with actors and directors. It was like the best schooling possible for me. And then a theater person saw it and said, oh, this is a musical review, put music in it. And the only musical review I'd ever seen or heard of at that point was Ain't Misbehavin', which is a great Fats Waller musical, but it's 5 people singing songs, and I didn't know what they were talking about. But I thought, oh, there might be something there, and I really wanted to learn and expand my horizons. And so a friend of mine introduced me to a composer named Jimmy Roberts, who had written some shows and who happened to live right near me, and was a great composer and had a piano, and he liked my sketches, and he said, okay, let's turn this into a musical review. And I thought, oh, that'll be easy. And of course it wasn't. And the first thing he said was, when you're a lyricist, and I had never written a lyric before in my life. I'd seen a gazillion musicals at this point, and I certainly knew, pop lyrics very much. And I said, if we're gonna write these, I want these songs to be funny because these sketches are funny. And this was in the 90s when musical theater became very British and, falling chandeliers and things. And I was like, well, you know what? Why don't I write the lyrics? And that way I can make sure that the jokes are funny. And I had no idea what I was doing. And Jimmy Roberts, God bless him, sort of actually said, okay, if you want to do this, you should read Larry Hart and Sondheim and Oscar Hammerstein, read this, and Dorothy Fields, and read these people and study them. And we took 2 years, and Jimmy was some ways my instructor, but in some ways I was teaching myself. And I wrote, and that show became I Love You, You're Perfect Now Change, which sort of started me, which was just this little, people, when shows become a success for whatever reason, people always think it's, of course, you wrote a 4-person dating review. Of course it was. And like, I was just writing what I found funny, what was going on in my life, what was going on in my friend's life. And we made it 4 people because what I love about theater is when actors play multiple characters. So I thought, oh, this will be really part of the fun. And that's how I wrote that show with Jimmy. And that's really how I got started as a lyricist. Through stubbornness, and like, I'm gonna do this because I want to do this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so changing the subject a little bit. You have 2 Tony Awards, Best Book and Best Score for Memphis. Just like, what was that moment like for you? And also, I asked this the last episode, and I'd be interested to hear it from a writer's perspective.
Yeah.
For you as a writer, how important is it to win the Tony?
it was what I call the childhood dream time come true. I mean, I watched the Tonys growing up in New Jersey, and I would go in and see Broadway shows, and I saw a lot of the Tony winners of when I was a kid. It was like Annie and Shenandoah and On the 20th Century, Amos Behaving, all those shows. So I sort of had this very grand idea of theater, and it seemed very intimidating to get to that level. And I don't think I started out thinking that. And then when I sort of just however, I worked for 20 years. I'd been at that point, I'd say at least probably about 15 years of writing for the theater, either part-time or full-time. I'd worked a lot, and I'd written a lot of things. And so when we suddenly were in the Tony conversation, and then we won some like precursor awards, and I got, it was very nerve-wracking because I thought, oh my God, we can actually win. Start telling you're going to win, and I was like, no, don't even say that. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Get away from me, because I'll get too nervous, and it's just ridiculous. So being there, and I think our night, if memory serves, we were like the first three awards. David and I won. David won for orchestrations from Memphis. I think was the first award. And I remember sitting there saying, oh my God, David, who I've been collaborating for 10 years, just won a Tony. And then we won for, I think, score together. And then I won for book. So that was like we literally had just sat down, had no idea what the order was. And it came up, and suddenly we had 2 Tony Awards each. And it really was childhood dream come true. That's the only way to, it was just, and I remember thinking, I am going to enjoy this ride because it's just so it was surreal and fun and great. And oddly, sort of my most cherished moment of that night was watching the Memphis number done on stage, and we did sort of a version of our finale, this big upbeat number. And remember, and because that number always works, and you can feel the excited audience. I remember just thinking, oh wow, we really deserve to be here. I deserve to be here. I mean, that was almost the big, like, seeing that number on that stage, and the response of that Tony audience was really something. But what it did for my career, as I like to say, the next morning I wasn't a better writer, but everyone thought I was. So that's what it did. So I still had to face the blank page, had all of the trials and tribulations of any writer, but everyone thought I was. So the phone started ringing more, and it certainly gave me entree into a bunch of other theater opportunities, which I've been very grateful for.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you started to touch on this, but many of your collaborations with your musicals, such as Toxic Avenger, Memphis, Chasing the Song, and most recently Diana, are with David Bryan, who's the keyboard player of Bon Jovi. So how did this special partnership form? And, what is your collective creative process like together? I mean, you've achieved great success together as well.
Yeah, as they say, collaborations are like a marriage, and they have, David and I get along great. We actually, unlike most marriages, we've never had an argument, never had a disagreement. We've had creative, loggerheads where we sort of work things out, but we always talk things through. And David came into my life because I was writing, I'd written Memphis. I was commissioned to write Memphis by a producer, and I wrote the first draft of it. I wrote what I call dummy lyrics, which were just, these are the lyrics to sort of get the story down. This is what these songs would be about. I sometimes writers will write a paragraph about what a song's going to be about, like in a treatment. I prefer to actually write a lyric that'll morph and change and evolve, just because I feel like the images and the beat, the rhythm of it sort of helps me envision the number more. So I did that. Memphis is about the birth of rock and roll. And so I wanted a real rocker. I know great theaterized, but I wanted a real rocker, and I knew exactly 0 rock stars. So I gave it to my agent, and he said, oh, I know a rock and roll manager. And he sort of sent it into the black hole where agents send scripts, and forgot about it for a couple months. And then I get a call one day out of the blue saying, hi, Joe, my name is David Bryan. I just read your script for Memphis, and I hear every song in my head, and I want to know how I can write the score. And I thought, oh, well, I said, rock stars don't call me every day. So I was like, okay. I said, pick out a lyric. I wrote these dummy lyrics, do whatever you want with it, and send me a demo. And he goes, okay. And he hung up. Nice 10-minute casual conversation. And I thought, 2 weeks from now, he'll send me something maybe. And the next day there was a FedEx. This was sort of before computers got as evolved as they have. FedEx on my doorstep. And there was this demo in it, a CD, and I put it in my DVD player. And David wrote the music for the music of my soul, which is Yui's our main character's "I Want" song, and it's the second song in the show. And I literally listened to it once, and I said, I hope he's not crazy because this is the guy. And that song has stayed in the show. It's morphed as songs morph, but when I went back recently and listened to his original demo, I'm like, oh, that's the song. So he just had a natural dramatic feel, and I'm not a musician and I can't speak music technically, but I think sort of my strength is I know what I like. I know when I like a melody, I know like when I like a groove, I know when I like a rhythm, and I know when I think it's appropriate for a character I'm writing. So, and David was hungry at that point because Bon Jovi, this was in the mid 90s, had sort of peaked, and suddenly grunge was in and rock and roll was out, and John Bon Jovi was doing movies, and the band was sort of teetering. And so David was looking for another gig, essentially, another creative outlet. And he found musicals. So that's how that came together. And then we just liked each other. Our first show took a long time to get to Broadway, but from the first time we put it up, it just worked. And we just worked well together. I think what the good thing about our collaborative marriage is that I come from the world of theater and I love rock and roll, and he comes from the world of rock and he loves theater. And we bring those two different disciplines to each other. And I always say to him, make sure this song doesn't get too theatery, make sure it's rock, and he, I think, always listens to me when I say, this is what we need to make this character work and this feeling. And he also, we both have similar styles in that we both write very quickly. So we can write a song, we can try 3 or 4 different versions of a song in a day. And neither of us get pouty about it.
Wow, absolutely excellent. And you also wrote the book and lyrics for the new musical and soon to be released on Netflix, Diana.
Yeah.
So what was it like adapting the stories of British royalty to the stage in musical form?
Well, I'm a big, as I said, I'm a big political junkie. I'm also a big historical buff. And I was just I read a lot of bios and histories, and you never know, I've written plays on political events and histories, and you never know where ideas come from. And I was just happened to pick up a bio of Princess Diana, who sort of would have been my age if she lived. And I remembered her, but I wasn't that in tune with her. I mean, I really remember her picking up the AIDS baby and shaking the AIDS patient hand. I mean, that sort of resonated with me in my life. So, and just remember loving her for that. And then I just started writing a bio of her. And I have to say, I had no idea that Camilla was Charles's girlfriend before he met Diana. This was before The Crown, all that. And I was like, oh my God, that's like sick. That's
Are you a fan of The Crown?
You know what? I've only seen the first couple episodes. I know so much about the royal family right now. Yeah. I've moved on to other worlds.
I skipped to this season entirely. I was just in it for Princess Diana.
Oh yeah, well I'm sure yeah. But I read this bio and then I said, oh, and as soon as I read it, I knew sometimes you sort of have to really dig to find your story, but I knew the story was of a young woman. She was a girl, really, 19, when she got married. And imagine, you guys are older than 19, I'd say, but imagine anyone who is 19, suddenly overnight you're the most famous photographed person in the world, and you were just an anonymous person, a regular person. I mean, she was from the aristocracy, but the aristocracy at that point, she was living in a flat with her 4 girlfriends, going to, Duran Duran concerts. So she, was thrust into the spotlight, and it was really a fraudulent marriage. And I thought, oh, this is a show just about the marriage. So what I did immediately was just pick out 4 lead characters, which was Diana, Camilla, Charles, and Queen Elizabeth. So there's no Fergie, there's no Prince Philip, there was a whole circus sideshow going on at the same time, which I remember. Prince Andrew, those characters aren't in the show. And it's literally about how this young woman has these, really old-fashioned princess dreams. I mean, she really was in love with the image of Charles. And then, of course, anytime you have a fantasy, when the fantasy becomes a reality, you realize, oh, the fantasy is not all that it's supposed to be cracked up to be. And then how she really struggled to find her own self and her own voice and get out of the marriage. And that's sort of the arc of the show. It's really about their marriage. So, and because she was an 80s pop princess, I called up David and I said, did you ever meet her? He goes, no, I never met her. He goes, but I always liked her. You know, I always liked the image of her. And he goes, well, what about, you know, doing a rock opera essentially on Princess Diana? And he was immediately all in. He loved that idea. So that's how that happened.
Awesome. Well, I can speak for Brandon. We're excited to see it in the future.
Yeah. Very proud. I think it's very proud of it.
All right. So what shows, playwrights, artists are some of your biggest inspiration and continue to inspire your own work?
You know, I'm so like, I feel like we're in a, there's so much narrative out there, you know, in both television and theater right now. And there's so much interesting theater being done, both in musicals and in plays, and then all these television series are suddenly hiring playwrights. So there's actually a real, something that, you know, when I started, there were TV writers and playwrights were very different, and you had to go to LA, and some people went back and forth, but not a lot. And now you really can do that. You really don't even have to choose, which is like the British sort of model, which is great. So, you know, I'm inspired by creativity. I'm inspired by work. I'm inspired very much by music and contemporary music of all sorts. I'm inspired, you know, like there's so many great playwrights right now, writing really interesting work, and some of it's, you know, very, you know, mainstream and commercial, and some of it's not. Some of it's just, you know, really gritty and bizarre, and I sort of love both. But, you know, I mean, when I started out, I was inspired by a lot of people, but I was inspired by Arthur Miller's Social Conscience. I was inspired by Joe Orton's like edgy take on life. And, you know, he died so tragically young. I think What the Butler Saw is a great farce. I was inspired by Neil Simon's ability to write a joke. I mean, Neil Simon, you know, theater is funny now, and even dramas are funny. You know, the dramas didn't used to be funny. Tennessee Williams wasn't funny. You know, Eugene O'Neill wasn't funny at all. Arthur Miller wasn't funny. And then Neil Simon came along, and suddenly, you know, the great playwrights, Tony Kushner's funny, Lynn Nottage is funny, you know, Tracy Letts is funny. Everyone's funny now. So I was inspired by him when I started, like how to construct a joke on stage, how to get rolling laughs. So, but I really am, I have to say, I really am. Billy Wilder, a great movie director and writer. You know, I always loved his work. Norman Lear, you know, from television. I grew up on All in the Family and Maude and the Jeffersons and Sanford and Son. I always, you know, so really sort of a potpourri of people have inspired me.
Yeah. Okay. So this kind of follows that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have, you know, adapted quite a few works. You've done Babes in Arms at the Godspeed Opera and Allegro at Signature Theater. So what's it like to kind of like essentially rephrase someone's work and make it your own?
Yeah, it's funny. I did those works early on in my career, and and one of the reasons I did it, they were people approaching me, so it was a gig. So I got paid, which since I was a full-time playwright at that point, that's not to be overlooked. But, you know, I wanted to go back to the classic time of musicals, when musicals first became integrated, and really see how people did them. So the Babes in Arms show was just, you know, I think Goodspeed approached me about that. And, you know, it's interesting taking these great songs, and some of those scripts, depending on where it is, were written off the cuff because they didn't expect these shows to last. And so some of them would write, you know, in the 20s and 30s, they would do 3 shows a year and just, you know, throw songs on stage and throw these plots on stage. So it was interesting going there and really sort of figuring out all of that stuff. But, and I wrote rewrote Allegro because Jamie Hammerstein, who was Oscar's youngest son, was my mentor in this business. And Jamie asked me to do it. And Allegro was sort of known as the first art musical. It was Rodgers and Hammerstein, original Hammerstein book. Agnes DeMille directed and choreographed. I believe the first woman to do so on Broadway. And it's really it's an art musical, and it's weird that the narrative sort of goes in and out. It's sort of unwieldy at times, but always fascinating with a beautiful score. And so I sort of, straightened it out. I made it more of a story, and it actually worked really well at Signature. But I also tried, anytime I do a book, I've ever written older things, and it's been a while now, is I try to get in the head of the writer and stay as true to their vision, I try to read about what they intended to do with it. And then I try to interpret it in a modern way and my way, for better or for worse. But I do feel intimidated by the writers that I've adapted over the years.
Yeah. So again, following up on that,
Yeah.
you wrote the book for All Shook Up, the Elvis Presley jukebox musical.
Yeah.
Can you describe like the experience of kind of curating somebody else's work now? Not necessarily adapting it, but curating it and then trying to make a story out of it.
Yeah, it's, I have a couple more of those coming up. The jukebox musicals, when I did All Shook Up, which I think it was 2005, it hit Broadway. So I probably started working on it in the early 2000s. I was approached by the Elvis Presley estate, like, we have these songs. It was right at the cusp of Mamma Mia, which really started the modern jukebox phase. And that's when people took these songs and made, and did original stories around these songs and stuff. And I was a huge Elvis fan, and I just said yes. But I said yes. I said yes, and then hung up and said, "Holy hell, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. What do you do with all these desperate songs?" And they specifically said, "We don't want Elvis in it. Do not make this an Elvis bio. That's not what we want to do." So I said, "Sure." So I just, I was like, "What do I do with these?" And the first thing you do is you listen to the music over and over. And I sort of went through, I think he recorded about 800 songs. And I said, okay, here's 10 super famous ones that I need to put in it no matter what. And then let me find 20 others that I love or that I think are theatrical or that I really have a good, you have to find a story in them. And then you get like a list of 30, 40 songs. And I say, you have to write backwards. You have to say, okay, who kind of character would sing this song? And how can I spin it so it's just not "I love you" kind of thing? Just not, if it's a love song, it's just that character saying "I love you, I love you." Okay, let's sing a song. How do you spin it? Give it a subtext, give it comedy. So you sort of write backwards in a way. It's the opposite of writing a musical, where I'm working on a couple things now where I'm outlining them and then we'll stick the songs in based on what the need of the story is. But there, it's like, these are the songs. Can you create a story that's at least fun? And that was just supposed to be a fun, joyous show. And what struck me about Elvis was how his music has lasted and how it still sounds fresh, and how much joy. Also, when you go down to like Graceland, like how much joy, like really deep-seated joy, he still brings people. And I thought, well, what else does that? And then I thought, oh, the Shakespeare comedies, they've lasted and they've brought joy to many people over the centuries now. So that's how I sort of married the two. And I thought, oh, Elvis and Shakespeare would be an interesting combo that people wouldn't expect.
Absolutely. So, Joe, where were you prior to the COVID shutdown and right at that time?
I was, yeah, I'm sorry.
And how have you been able to? Because I know you, Diana was pretty like on the verge of opening or just in previews. And so, how did this impact? That process and whatever other creative process you were going through at the time.
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate. I had a very busy year planned. I was supposed to, I had just done a workshop of a new musical of a Dr. Seuss show in January, based on If I Ran the Circus. That went extremely well, and we were suddenly moving ahead with that. And we had been in rehearsal all of February for Diana for Broadway. And we had just started. We were several previews into Diana on Broadway, and we were doing what you do in a preview of a Broadway musical. We were working on the show every day. We were sharpening lines. We were about to put a new song in. We were doing all sorts of things, and the show was going very well. And but the pandemic, by the time our first preview happened, the pandemic was coming down the tracks, and you were, and it's a high pressure situation doing a Broadway show. I love it, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot of money at stake. There's a lot of opinions. There's 1,000 new people are coming to see your show every day, every night. So and we're working every day. We're performing at night and working in the day. And this pandemic is coming out, and we're also in central New York City in these very crowded theaters. And so it was a unique time. I so loved working on Diana and loved those people that I wasn't particularly stressed by it. But even by the time we started previews, Chris Ashley and the director and I had to talk, and we said, like, it'll be shocking if we open at this point, because we really thought, there were rumors by the time we went up that Broadway would have to shut down for a time. So we just thought, let's bow our heads, do the best show we can every night, and keep working on it. So we basically kept working on the show during this unique time, and the show was going great. The audience response was great, and our actors were just, so focused and doing great work and all that. And then we were waiting, and then suddenly you start hearing about people getting sick, and we knew the cast of Moulin Rouge had gotten ill. And these were all our friends, these people were our friends. We had to work with everyone. It's a very small community. So we were getting concerned. And then finally the governor shut, I think it was the banned gatherings of 500 or more people. And so Broadway shut down. And we were still about 3 weeks away from opening. We had literally just started previews we maybe had 7 or 8 under our belt. So, and then we were suddenly stopped, and we were rehearsing, as you do. It was about 2 o'clock, and the producer walked in and said, okay, stop rehearsals. Everyone, we're going to gather around. And we all knew what was coming. We were all just waiting by that point. And while she was telling us, that we were taking a pause, and because of the pandemic, all Broadway was shutting down, we were in the house, and she was on the stage, and behind her, stagehands were wrapping up the costumes and putting things away, because they knew it was like a hard shutdown for, we thought, a month or two. And then, we didn't perform that night, obviously. But the next day, that Friday, my collaborator, David, Chris Ashley, our director, the choreography team, Ian Eisendrath, our music supervisor, and Beth Williams, our producer, came to my apartment. We sat around my dining room table and talked for 4 hours about what we're going to do next creatively. That's all we talked about. Because we said we're in and then 2 days later, I actually talked to David, and he was coughing, and he had gotten sick. So, and then I found out later on that a lot of our cast, no one too seriously got ill, had gotten tested positive for COVID. Some people got sick. So, so thank God we shut down then. But it was a freaky time. But, so for about 3 weeks or so, maybe a month, while we were seeing what was happening with this, and I was hearing of friends getting sick and all that, I really couldn't write at all. It was too, I didn't know what to write about. I think I was tweaking Diana because we had some specific things, and everyone I know was really just sort of shell shocked and not knowing what was happening. And New York was in a terrible, terrible spot then. So we all sort of, I took a break, and then we started working, and then we found out about Netflix, and we started working on Diana again, and sort of, after about a couple of months, I said to myself, okay, Broadway and theater shut down for the foreseeable future. We have no idea how long that is, but you're a writer, and the one thing you always are complaining about is you never have enough time to write. Well, now you're isolated, and it might not be the most inspiring time to write, but you have some projects that you can finish up, which I did. So things which I loved that I was sort of waiting to get done. And then you have other ideas. So that's sort of what I just sort of, after taking time to just catch my breath. But I also, I think, talk to friends and talk to other writers and like, what are you doing now? How is this possible? I mean, one thing which I haven't done is I haven't written anything about COVID or anything. I didn't want to write in the moment because I'm sure people are, but I'm like, I have a feeling when this goes away, we're just going to want to forget about it. And it's hard to write about what you're going through and any sort of, massive thing. But I did then this summer. I'd always wanted to write a one-person play, and I had an idea for a one-person play, which was based on science deniers, which was happening with COVID, but it's been around for a long time. So I wrote a one-woman show that I'm very excited about, and I have a director for now, and we're looking for an actress. And that's something I don't know if I ever would have done, but I figure when theaters come back, they're going to be looking for something smaller to do. And so I wrote the show just because I was like inspired to write it and I had the time. So that's how but you have to, it's hard. It's not an easy thing. And I think every writer and creative person approaches it differently. But I basically thought to myself, Writers need isolation, and I actually have it. I hopefully will never have it again to this extent. So I'm going to make the best of it.
Nice. All
Yeah.
right. So just starting to wrap up here.
Uh-huh.
You've had an amazing career and amazing successes. So what can you offer to young artists, advice-wise, that are just trying to make it in the business right now?
Yeah. Well, to artists, to any young or aspiring or any age, what I love about the arts is that you could enter it and leave it and re-enter it, or enter it for the first time at any age. So, so I think that's one of the really special, which is really something you can't do in any other business. I know people who've started acting and things, much, much later in life and have done very well. But I think that I always consider myself a lifelong student of theater, of writing, of narrative, of history, of politics, human nature, of psychology, of other culture, of the world. Like I just consider myself a lifelong student. I read a lot. I see a lot of shows when I can. And I think that's really served me well. It's just sort of having a curiosity about other things besides yourself. And I think that's the big thing. So I always tell students and younger people, you want to be an artist, you're a student. You're a student of everything else that's going on around you. So go out there and read and travel if you can, and watch things that aren't your cup of tea. There's certain things things I don't love, but I expose myself. I'm like, oh, sometimes I don't like this type of music. And then I hear it, I'm like, oh, but that's really interesting what they're doing with the lyrics there. So, go see big commercial shows and little shows in basement with 40 people, have opinions, and have opinions that are different than everyone else's, if you feel like. How many times, I mean, I've certainly done, I'm sure everyone's done it. You see something that everyone loves and you're like, I don't know. Well, ask yourself why. Why do you not like it and everyone else does? And then I see sometimes things which I love and they get, critically dismissed and don't run. I'm like, that was really good work. And those people really should be, and I'd be very happy if I wrote that. So I would just say you're, especially if you're young and you don't have responsibilities of life yet, boy, get out there and travel and see and put yourself out there. I mean, when I started, I was literally writing in basement theaters for my drunk friends on weekends. And I put my own money in what I was making in my day job into these little shows I was doing. And it was just a great lab to sort of work and how to do it. And there was something there's no, unlike being a lawyer or an accountant where you get a degree and then this degree leads to that job and blah, blah, blah. There's no magic formula. I mean, school's great. Go to all the school you can, educate yourself you can, but there's no magic formula. You have to figure it out yourself, and you have to figure out your voice, how you want to express it, and then you have to figure out your way in this world. And everyone's unique and different, which of course is what makes art great.
For sure. Thank you for that. Before we wrap up, I always love to ask this. You've shared some incredible stories with us today, but is there one story from your career that you just love to tell and share with our audience today?
That's a great question, and there is actually. So you had mentioned my show also got my Elvis Presley jukebox musical, which I think was maybe 2005 on Broadway, and I had been working on the show for a while. It was my first Broadway opportunity. And we had done some readings of it, some presentations, and people were very excited about it. A lot of producers came on. There was a lot of money offered to us. I spent 2 years just working on that show and not doing other things, which and I like to work on multiple projects at once. So that's very unusual for me, but I'm like, I have to focus. This is this. I met Chris Ashley, who's a great director, had great people in it, and great designers, and really first class all the way. And we played out of town, went great. Everyone was very excited. And we opened on Broadway, and for whatever reason, audiences are enjoying it, but it's not the hit that we hoped it would be. Ran for, I think, about 6 months or so and closed. And it was really sort of disappointing time, I have to say. Even though I love the show and the people in it were great, and it certainly has had a really rich post-Broadway life. It was certainly disappointing. I, and that's a time where I couldn't write for like a month or two after while it was running and really in trouble and just trying to figure it out. You know, Broadway's such a different beast. It's so commercial. You have to make each show has to make so much money, and it's so public. So you're I wouldn't call it a failure, but the fact that a show's not a hit, everyone knows, and everyone sort of says, "Are you okay?" You know, they treat you like you're ill or something. So I didn't know what to do, and I remember thinking to myself at the time, "All right, there are two things I could do. One is I could lick my wounds and go away somewhere and work on a new thing for 2 or 3 years, or maybe go to LA and see if I can break into sitcoms or something and just really like readjust my life and forget about Broadway and stuff. That's one thing I can do. And I know writers who've done that, you know, who've had a show that didn't work out and they go off and they teach or they do something else or they just really stop. And I said, well, I bet that's a lot of people expect me to do that, but I really love writing for theater. And there was some behind the scenes stuff in All Shook Up that I was not happy with. And I also learned so much. It was really a masterclass in how to write for that. So I said, what I want to do is what no one expects me to do, which is I'm going to double down and write, instead of writing half as much, I'm going to write twice as much. And so for about 2 years, I wrote and wrote and wrote new things, fixed old things, and my phone didn't ring. Like I was, you know, I had some older shows that were still playing regionally, so I could sort of survive. But my phone, there was no after All Shook Up, there was no, no one was calling me. But I wrote and wrote and wrote, and then suddenly 2 years later, this new stuff I'd written, which I would say was better than my earlier stuff, was suddenly getting produced, and people were suddenly interested in me again. And one of those shows that I had sort of finished that we had started working on already was Memphis. So 4 years later, I was back on Broadway with Memphis, which was a hit and, won 2 Tony Awards. And that's literally because I said, I'm not done with this yet. I'm going to double down and write myself out of this.
That's excellent. It's inspiring to know that was your mind throughout it all,
Just stubbornness and love of the craft. I didn't want to give it up yet. Love of the craft. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been such a great time talking with you.
Thanks, guys. I enjoyed
Learning
it.
about your career and all of your incredible successes. Is there anything we can promote on here for you today, or any upcoming projects that you would want to talk about?
Yeah. Well, everything is on hold. I have, but I guess Diana is coming to Netflix. We were in a bubble. We were not allowed to leave a hotel or the theater for a month. This past September, it's a beautiful production. It's a live capture on stage, no audience. So we ripped out the seats and we had like 10 cameras, beautiful camera work. Chris Ashley directed, gorgeous job. It comes to Netflix. I don't have a date yet, but I believe in mid-April. So please watch that. And then once theater opens up, hopefully in the fall, or summer or fall, the sort of all the shows I had that were that were about to come will be coming then.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. This
Thanks,
has been
guys.
great. Stay well, stay safe.
I will. You too. Thank you. I enjoyed the talk very much. And
Okay,
it's great you guys are doing, getting out there and talking creativity, because I think that's what people need in this time. And I always, view others, how they handle it, and inspiration, is so important at this point. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed that last episode. We're so excited to announce the launch of our campaign for 2 very important organizations, Broadway Cares and the Actors Fund, to directly benefit the theater industry in the new year.
With the inspiration and initiation from Broadway's Caesar Samayoa and Delon Grant of Come From Away, we will now be accepting donations to our company Venmo, which is at Whatcha Doin podcast, for the near future, to split the donations between those 2 worthy organizations. And from there, we will be doing a big monthly donation to each organization on behalf of our podcast and its guests.
We hope you can see it in your heart at this time to spare whatever you can. $1 goes a long way right now, and it's all to help an industry that has given us all so much.
Thank you so much for all of your help to our listeners and followers, and please spread the word. We really appreciate it.